Man, I wish I actually have been having a hard time sleeping at night with this whole George Floyd situation, man. I like it's uh it's really weighing on me. And I'll tell you how I feel. And this is like um I guess this is in the interest of full disclosure of where I'm at. Because I think people are deceive themselves when if they think that where they're at in their own personal life or where they see things, where they sit doesn't sort of like color the lens, through which they see the world. And for me, and I want you to introduce yourself to the audience here in a second, because some people may not know who you are, obviously, that follow me, or vice versa. And I want to make sure everybody knows who you are too. But for me, it's when the Darren Wilson, Michael Brown shooting happened. That was like a real watershed moment for me. That was like a big catalyst for why I started doing this, right? Humanizing the badge. That was like, to me, a huge thing, because I saw how cops were being unfairly characterized or mischaracterized in the media. And I thought, man, I think we need to fight that battle. And years and years and years of sort of like grinding at that and doing that. And my feeling, and I'm not a quitter, but my feeling is just like, what am I doing anymore? Like, I feel like this situation took us from any progress we got back to like square -1, man. Like, I'm just like, dude, and I haven't found all of the right words to say as a result of that. And it's had a personal impact on me. And I know another sort of like thing that is really frustrating me is, as someone who is on social media in a very public way, it's like people demanding that I say something. They demand that I say something. They demand what I say, and they demand when I say it,
Yeah.
And I'm just a little overwhelmed, because typically, like you, when you do like, your Tillman takes and all this stuff, like, you don't want to speak. You want your words to matter. You want it to be well-reasoned. You want to recognize that, hey, I know I'm a cop. I'm white. I live in Metro Detroit. I don't live in, in this case, Minneapolis. There's all sorts of like contextual things that happen that can color my perception. And when it comes to like breaking police stuff down, I have to like work backwards through those layers in my life to make sure that the words that I'm saying, I feel, are fair and accurate, honest, and point us to the truth. A lot of people think that my fidelity is to the thin blue line, like, oh, it's always about that. Or some people think that I should spend all of my time, if I was really a good cop, or if I was really about humanizing the badge, my whole account would only be about exposing what I perceive or what people perceive to be bad cops. And it's just not easy, man. And I to be quite honest, this situation brings it to a head for me in a way that, man, I'm just freaking tired, dude. I'm tired, and this is not helping. And I don't bring this up to take away from the tragedy of what we're talking about today. I'm not trying to make it about me. I just want whoever watches this to understand that for me, it's not as simple as just saying like, oh, I watched a video and this is what I think, and let's move on. I've really wanted to like sit on this one before I come out and say, and there was already so much noise going on that it was hard for me to feel like I could even say anything that cut through it. And that's
Yeah.
why, like, my only statement was, I'm just sad that no matter what I say, it's just going to be used as a weapon in someone's social media cannon to fire it across. And it's like the minds are already made up. So that's why I invited you into this conversation, because I think that's in part a much better response than a paragraph or even an individual video that I could make. And
Yeah.
you put out a great video about the law enforcement code of ethics and how that relates. You did that video with Tenor, and having a conversation about it. And that's where I was like, man, having good conversations right now are really important. And even my personal Facebook and stuff like that, I've invited some people to have conversations, rather than just make these definitive statements. So anyway, Ryan, welcome to hang to the Zoom call. Tell people who you are, what you're all about, and then I guess you can respond to what my initial feelings are.
Well, first and foremost, Mike, thanks for having me, man. My name is Ryan Tillman. I'm a Southern California police officer, and I'm also the founder of Breaking Barriers United, which is a company that's designed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. I started that company almost 5 years ago, and the sole purpose was to bridge that gap. And that's only because when I became a police officer, I saw like life completely differently. So a little bit of backstory about me is I never really liked police officers growing up. I had some bad run-ins with a few of them. I would always say, police officers are those guys that got picked on in high school, so they became police officers so they can pick on everybody else. Like that was my mentality prior to becoming a police officer. And then, fast forward when I became a police officer and started getting put in positions that were very scary. Some were very controversial. You have a different perspective. And so the humanizing moment for me was, after the whole Michael Brown thing, when I had a discussion with my mom, and my mom was like, I asked myself, and this is my mom speaking, I asked myself what it is that I would have done what would Ryan have done if he was in the same situation as the officer. And then she was like, after thinking about it, she was like, I was kind of came to the conclusion that he probably would have done something similar, if not the same thing, just because he wants to come home at the end of the night. Ryan is a husband, he's a father of 3 kids, he's a son. And so when I thought about it from my pumpkin, because, my mom calls me her pumpkin, she was like, I realized he probably would have did it because he wants to come home. And it doesn't make him a bad person. It doesn't make him a corrupt cop. It just makes him a human being. And so that was a light bulb moment for me when I started realizing that, officers are humans. And if people saw Ryan Tillman as opposed to Officer Tillman, then maybe things could change. And so that kind of started off this mission for me to kind of like what you're doing is humanize, officers, so that way people can see the person behind the badge. But when we talk about this whole phenomenon that's going on, it's a very, very heavily layered onion that we got to peel back. And there's layers to it. There's history to it. There's deeper roots to this. And it's not a one size fits all. And so as you're talking, Mike, you said you're tired, and I did something with Donut, or I talked to Donut yesterday, and he's tired. And a lot of people don't understand the responsibility that comes with having the social media platform. And quite frankly, if you ask me, there's a lot of people that don't take having social media influence. They don't take it responsibly. They put out errant messages without thinking about the consequences behind their words. And not even realizing that, in this day and age that we live in, a lot of people's primary source of information comes from social media. So if you're an influencer and you're talking to the person that doesn't get any information from anywhere else, then now you're going to believe the person that puts out this message that actually has no reasoning behind what it is that they said. And so as my platform has been growing, as BBU's been growing, I was talking to my wife this morning. I was like, man, the responsibility is growing. People were hitting me up right after this is going on. And it's like, I have an obligation to say something, but at the same time, I don't have all the facts. And then at the same time, I'm an officer and I can go out and get into a situation tomorrow. And if I said something about a guy that did something this way and I go out and do something similar, then now they're going to crucify me even more because I put myself on a pedestal. A lot of people don't understand that. You know what I mean? And this is not a woe is me moment, but it's one of those that I know what comes with the territory. I've accepted that. And so I have to be able to acknowledge, what's right and what's wrong when we see it. And that's the only thing that lets me sleep at night. And so fast forwarding to the situation involving George Floyd, I want to touch on something that you brought up. And you said, I'm going back to the words again, I'm tired. A lot of people don't realize is that when we saw that video, a lot of us lost a piece of that. And when I say a lot of us officers, we lost a part of everything that we stand by, because this is not the fight. This is not the oath that we stood up to, to do when we took that oath when we became officers. And so when I saw the death of George Floyd, I had to make a mental decision in my mind is, am I going to stand by and be silent, or am I going to stand up and say, call what's a spade, like I always refer to it? And I had to call a spade, because if not, then I now become a part of the problem. And that's what I think people are crying out. And so we're at a pivotal point in our community right now, in our society, because if we don't start acknowledging as officers what's wrong, then we're never going to gain the community's trust. But at the same time, people need law enforcement. They need us. I just read a disturbing article right now that said that the University of Minnesota has decided to stop utilizing Minnesota Police Department at any of their big events. And on the face value, yeah, it sounds good, but that sounds like an emotional reaction to an isolated incident. And the reason that is because that incident occurred with George Floyd, and it's a sad tragedy that happened. He should have never lost his life. That officer should have never been in that situation at first. He should have never been an officer, because what he did was completely wrong. But we can't make a grander decision based on that one isolated incident, because what's going to happen is crime is still going to occur at these big events. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to take advantage of the situation, the system, and get over on people, innocent people, because of one isolated incident. We're seeing that with the looting. We're seeing that with the rioting. I see it as people taking advantage of a situation instead of actually looking at the situation for what it is and saying, how can we actually go back and and find real solutions? And so one of the last things I say before I turn it back over to you is, as officers, we have to go back to why we started doing the work we're doing, which is a humanizing approach. And so when we say we're getting tired, what I look at this situation is sometimes we forget ourselves that officers are human beings, because we hold ourselves to such a higher standard, as we should. We put ourselves on a high pedestal, as we should, because there comes greater responsibility. But sometimes we forget that we're human beings. And when we see the officers' actions of that video in Minneapolis, we also are seeing another human being doing something that is human nature that should have never been done in the first place. It was inhumane. It was deplorable. It was something that we don't train to do as officers. But yet what we saw was a human being making a completely terrible decision, which affects all of us as officers, and it affects the rest of the community as we look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things come to mind after listening to you for a second. And one is that I agree. I think you have to kind of go back, I know for me, that's what I've been thinking about is like, how do I talk to people? And I had so many conversations this morning. I mean, I'm sure you're getting inundated too with like people asking about this, talking about this. And I keep trying to sort of like preach this gospel of you can't live life. You got to pause. You just have to pause the emotion button for a second, long enough to understand that just because we saw something on video, the exception doesn't make it a rule. And the inverse to that is just because we don't see something on video or we don't see something on the news doesn't mean it's not happening. Like I had somewhat hate mail. Somebody said today, like, you support all these officers and I can only imagine your locker room talk and this, the other thing about how you, and I'm like, I said, like, man, you should be ashamed of yourself, man. You don't know me. You don't know a thing about me as a person. And people want to say this is a a broad sweeping thing, but then have a broad sweeping response. And it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it's just not helpful. So coming back to that why of saying like, I don't know what the path forward is for sure. For like, how do I continue to humanize in the badge? What does that look like in making content? What does that look like in putting it out there in a way that shows that there are people involved? And this is about people. It's about humans and the right to dignity and respect. As I would believe, and I think you would believe this too, is that we're made in God's image, and that every single person intrinsically, because of that, has value to them, no matter what they're doing, whether they're breaking the law or not. They have value. And so we have to be able to treat people with as much dignity and respect as the situation and circumstances can afford. And I think that's what makes this so tough, is that we see, if we would have saw 1 minute, 2 minutes of some type of control, right, situation to get it under control, but 7 minutes and 53 seconds of some of the hardest video I've ever had to watch. Like that makes this situation like, oh man, so hard. That's what's keeping me up at night, is like the lack of humanity. And then to see the response, and we'll get to that, like the lack of humanity in the response, right? Because people like angry that a man lost his life and then say, I hope that officer rots in hell. I hope the city burns. Like how do we demand humanity from law enforcement officers and then throw it back in the face of them? And it's like, and here we are sort of like stuck in the middle. We were talking about AJ, your co-host and friend of mine on the It's Needed podcast. Man, he had 2 officers shot. They're dealing with protests and riots. It's crazy, man. Like,
not only that, another
guys
friend of
like
mine,
us are in the middle here.
And then I don't know if you know Saint the Rapping Cop. He was on our podcast too. He was actually shot.
I heard that he was shot. Yeah,
3 times. I talked to him yesterday on the phone, and so that's what's crazy about it, is like.
Yeah, and just to pause real quick, like where I work, the county I'm in, we had an officer shot 2 days ago, still on a ventilator, still through surgery. At the same exact moment that someone's telling me that I'm justifying murder. My dad, he's a police chaplain. He's at the hospital with a family, and an officer's shot, saying, and what the words she was saying to her officers were, "Don't let me die." Like, man, you got to juxtapose these things, and getting people to step back. Hopefully conversations like this, where we like work through it and talk about it, if people will sit and just listen for a second, man, like they can see that this opens a door to understanding each other a little bit better, and hopefully helps us cut a little way forward.
100%. And this next response that I'm going to say, it might be radical for some, but it's not for me. It's not for you. I personally have a faith in Jesus Christ. And for me, that's the only thing that gives me wisdom. That's the only thing that gives me peace about understanding situations. I know and understand the Bible says that there are certain things that we just may not understand in life, but we can pray for peace, that it gives you that peace on your heart, so that way you don't have to be burdened with it. And the reason that's radical, maybe radical for some, is because most of the world doesn't understand that peace. And so as hard as it was for me to watch that video, as much as anger I have towards that officer, I can't judge, I can't judge that officer. I can't judge anybody because I'm not the judge. Now I can be upset. I can be emotionally charged about it, but I have to leave certain things up to God. Now, I will tell people all day long, like, the actions of that officer were completely wrong. It's completely, people know my stance on that. So I don't have to continue to tell and justify that. But you had asked the question, is how do we continue to humanize the badge? How do we continue to keep the hope alive? How do we continue to progress forward as officers? And what I'm going to say right now, certain officers aren't going to want to hear this. And I know that because this is what I faced from day one since I started my whole movement, is we have to be able to be honest and real with ourselves when we do screw up. Like, we have to be able to hold other officers accountable. And it's hard, don't get me wrong. Like, because, and I say it's hard because I'm still currently an active police officer. So if I go out today or tomorrow when I work and I freaking screw up, like I said before, I am going to be held to that same standard, and people are going to morning quarterback me galore. So to say that is very hard, but at the same time, I know it's a necessity because I can put up videos. I do Tillman takes all the time. And most of the Tillman takes I do, they're all justified shootings, most of them. If you actually really look at it, if you look at my page, it's very the ratio of justified shootings as opposed to unjustified shootings, it actually reflects reality, which is the amount of interactions that law enforcement has with the general public on every single day, and the amount of times we use force or kill somebody. 99% of justified stuff, you have 1% of bad stuff. So if you look at my page, it reflects that. But at the same time, we have to be adamant, though, when we do see those negative interactions, we have to call it what it is. And we can't. One of my pet peeves is like, well, like, officers will always go and start trying to figure, well, what about this, or what about that, or what about this? And I get it, and that's kind of a traditional thing. We've always done it like that in law enforcement. But at some point, we have to draw the line and say, no, bro, like, there is no what about this. And in this one, I guess the other hope for me is, like, almost every single officer I've talked to about this situation has called it what it was and said it was wrong. And that's what we talk about. That's what the media doesn't show. The media is not showing officers out there standing up for what's wrong is wrong. And that's the sad part about it. And that's the power behind social media, is we can create and control our own narrative, but yet we have to be willing to accept the narrative that we see. And oftentimes people don't want to accept that because now it puts them in a position to die to themselves and remove their pride from the situation and say that I was wrong. And so, that officer, one of my buddies said it the other day, like, the officer from Minneapolis that, knelt down on his knee, that was a pride situation. And if we talk about race, I mean, it's hard to say this was a racial situation for me because I don't even know the officer. I honestly don't. Like, does he have a history of, like, assaulting black people? Does he have a history of making racial slurs? Not to say that stuff needs to be in place for it not to be racial, but from a video, I can't necessarily say that was racially motivated. However, at the same time, I'm going to say it was pridefully motivated. I personally believe that the reason that officer stayed on his neck is because the moment he removed his knee from his neck was the moment he had to tell the people that were around him that he's wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think it was more motivated by his pride. Like, hey, look, they're telling him, hey, check his pulse. Hey, take your knee. Can you look at him? And he just stood there and watched. I think that officer was prideful because the moment he looked at him or checked his pulse or did anything, now he has to admit to them openly that I'm wrong. And and I know that that's a human nature. Man fell, if we talk about spiritually, man fell because the fall of man was because of pride. I think that was more of a pride issue than it was a racial issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things, and then I want to actually, we'll go through the actual incident itself. Because I want to talk about the incident and I want to talk about the response to it. But you said something earlier that I don't know that I agree with. And I think that's one of the values of having these conversations, is to show, like, where each of us are maybe be at. Because you said something about, like, this guy should maybe never have been a cop. And I'm not sure that that's true. Like, maybe not now.
Yeah, exactly.
At one point, I mean, I've seen this job, this job will change people. Mm-hmm. Like, you mentioned earlier, like, when you became a cop, like, where you were before, and then you became a cop, man, you see things different. Now, I wasn't a cop before. I had family members that were cops, but I didn't know. Like, I saw they enjoyed the job, or what their perspective was. And so when I got there, you would have never had me convinced that the world was as crazy as it seems, right? Like, until you become a cop, and then you're like, then you have to remind yourself too. And they teach us in the academy too, like, you need to have friends that aren't cops. Bless you.
Yes, thank you.
You need to have friends that aren't cops, because you'll start to see the world only through, you go call to call to call to call because things are going wrong, right? So, like, you can start to think, oh my God, everything is wrong.
Yeah.
And only I'm right. Right.
Yeah.
Like you can start to think that way. And in one sense, I think it's a positive thing to have that kind of confidence that says, hey, we need to bring right to wrongs, and I think I would agree with your assessment about the pride thing. Kind of like once he went down the path,
He was committed to it.
Didn't want to come back from that direction. And I feel like, so let's recap the incident and please correct me if I get things wrong. My understanding of what we know right now is there was a call about a fraud. So like a fraud complaint, forgery. My understanding is it was a fake like $10 bill.
Bill, yeah.
So a restaurant gets this fake bill, they call, and then in the process of the response, the dispatch updates were essentially, this guy's running into traffic. Now he's sitting on top of his car. Like, we think this guy is on something. Like, this is the call. And again, for people listening that don't have police experience, you get dispatch updates, you get information. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. It's a very fluid thing. So they arrive. Mr. Floyd is in a vehicle at that point. I don't know if it's his or he's in somebody else's. I have no idea. He's in a car. Is it his or somebody else's? I don't know. Did he drive it there? Was it open? He just sat in it? I have no clue. But he's in a car. I saw them open the door and whatever else. He's resisting, but he's not aggressing, if that makes sense, right? So like, he's not wanting to go into handcuffs. He's pulling away. I mean, it's kind of a typical thing, but it's not. He's not attacking these guys. Mm-hmm. He's just putting up a little bit of a fight. I don't, whatever. Get into handcuffs. It ends up on the ground at some point, and then there does seem to be a gap between the getting into handcuffs and where some of the cell phone video that I've seen starts. I don't know. There's a little bit of a gap, but essentially on the ground. And now we have this idea. My first reaction to this, I should say from a factual standpoint. So 7 minutes and 53 seconds goes by of the time, like he's in this position, right? And there seems to be varying degrees of pressure. He is able to communicate, at some, like saying I can't breathe, or my whole body hurts, or apparently he had also said he was claustrophobic. At some point people were saying the cop's hands were in his pocket, but I see like it's got black gloves on and it looks like he's just kind of casual, but I think his hands are mostly out. And then he passes out. They had called an ambulance because they perceived him to be on something. I think the officer even tells people in the crowd sort of filming, this is why you don't do drugs, kids. Like in his experience, I think he was a cop for like 17 years. My first impression of seeing this guy on the ground, like just camera starts, I see this guy on the ground. I'm like, oh, that dude's on something. That's my initial perception. That seems to be their perception. And he passes out. He says he's claustrophobic. They think he's got some kind of medical condition going on, which makes the situation worse, right? They called an ambulance, and then they still left him in this position.
Yeah.
And then he's put into the ambulance. He leaves. My understanding is that he dies at the hospital, that he doesn't die on the street. Mm-hmm. He dies at the hospital. Some of this is all subject to change, but I'm trying to kind of break down what we know to be true, so that we can analyze the officer's actions in light of the facts. So where I've taken heat on what my reaction is, and again, this is like a real damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, kind of like if I don't call the cop a murderer, I'm justifying a murderer. And if I call him a murderer, I'm ignoring due process.
Yeah.
So kind of trying to hold these things in tension and speak truth into this. So that's where I'm at. I think it's not going to surprise me if the cause of death is related to like an excited delirium thing or positional asphyxia. It's not going to surprise me at all. I would bet One of those two is going to be the cause of death. I bet, I have 2 months of income on it. Like, I'm pretty sure, like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be. I would, and this is what's frustrating about the way that the video is interpreted in terms of the cause of death, saying like he was executed with a knee on his neck. This is where I'm taking heat from a lot of cops. I don't think the cop's knee on the guy's neck is what killed him.
Mm-hmm.
I think his actions were poor. I think his overall. So from a tactical perspective, I think there's better ways to control people than what that is. And in the fray of an aggressive fight or aggressively trying to get someone to control, dude, knees end up on noses, knees end up on butts. They like elbows end up on backs. It can get ugly. It doesn't look good. Use of force is not like the movies. And so I don't have an issue with, oh, well, yeah, look, that looks bad, but he wasn't intending to like crush his windpipe or something like that. But I think the whole tactic from a control perspective was a bad, terrible. Then I think what you brought up yesterday is the humanity, there doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency to help a person, to reposition a person. I don't think I don't know if it's a training issue with Minneapolis. If you don't know about positional asphyxia as a cop in 2020, you either did not pay attention, or the city of Minneapolis is horrifically culpable in not teaching their officers about it. One of the two. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
I have no clue, but
or it's the pride, or it's the I'm not moving him because you guys are telling me to move him.
Yes. Either way, if it's kind of like I was trying to come up with every reason in the world. I really was. I was like, okay, well, maybe this guy was bleeding from his mouth and he had spit in the cop's face, so he was doing everything he could to keep his head away. Maybe did he bite his fingers? What's going on? I'm trying not to justify an improper treating of a person, but to think, what possible reason in light of these facts did an officer have to position himself this way, to treat this person this way? Is there any justification for this,
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell people first and foremost, because I know there's probably going to be some viewers that aren't police officers. The reason why officers will go and try to find other reasons, not necessarily to justify, but to understand, is because they've been in situations where on face value, looking at the video, it doesn't paint the whole story. Me personally, I have been in a situation that if you just look at a video, it looks awful. It could look inhumane. You know what I mean? It could look inhumane.
Yep.
But when you find out the totality of circumstances, you find out mindset, it paints a completely different picture. Yes. So that's why I understand what Mike is saying here, is because that's why we do it, is because we've been in situations that can look bad, but it wasn't what it looked like. And so I did the same thing as you. Again, not to justify the guy's actions, but to just try to wrap my head around the situation. But like you, when I did that, I've been in many of these exact same situations. If this video was a minute long, 30 seconds long, and we just saw him pass out and go, there would be a lot more questions.
And that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to even get to this point. The first videos that I was getting inundated with, it was like 20 some seconds or something, like a clip. And I'm like, this, and people are like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I don't know what I think about that, man. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. So then you watch it, and then the hardest part for me was watching it. When I was watching that video was, okay, in my mind, I'm like, okay, when is something going to change? Like, okay, is he going to do something? Is he going to change? And the whole, like, nothing changes for that 7 minutes and 53 seconds. And that's when I said, okay, you know what? There really is no explanation for this. And the reason why is because, like I said, I said this on the show I was on yesterday with Heather, is that with Tenor was that last Monday, I was in a situation where a guy was kicking out of police cars' windows. He had steel toe boots on. He was trying to kick us. We rolled him on his stomach. We put handcuffs on him. He starts saying, "I can't breathe." Immediately, as soon as he does that, this was before this incident, we rolled him over. We reassessed the situation. "Hey, man, are you okay? Can you breathe? Okay. You keep fighting? Okay, we'll roll you back on your stomach. If you're not fighting, okay, roll him on his side. Sit him up. You know what I mean? Put him in that, put a spit sock on him." So that was one incident. Then you brought up something else that's important for people to understand is excited delirium. Most people don't know what excited delirium is. But a lot of excited delirium, essentially when your body overheats from inside and it causes you to do some crazy astronomical things and it gives you some crazy strength. Mm-hmm. And the one thing to know about excited delirium is that person is going through a medical emergency. So one of the things that I've been taught is that if you recognize any possible, sign that this could be excited delirium, you need to get that person in position of comfort ASAP, even if you're waiting for EMS and them to respond, because this person is going through a medical emergency. And so there's so many different things that the officers could have done within that 7 minutes and 53 seconds that they didn't do. And so when you see a guy just sitting there with his knee on the guy's neck and you don't even show any compassion, you don't show any empathy, you don't look at him, you don't check his pulse, you don't look at his face. That to me, when I made my statement the first time, when I had the picture, when I said it was a murder to me, that's because at that moment in time, you're showing me you have no care or regard at all for this person's life. You, at that point in time, have made a decision that you do want to inflict some type of harm on this person because if you would have looked at him, if you would have checked the pulse, now you're showing me, okay, maybe you still care, but at the same time, you have to contain the situation. You just don't move. And so that's why I got so fired up about it. And that's why I got so upset is like, we have an obligation to preserve human life. We have an obligation to constantly reassess situations. The use of force continuum is always changing. If a person has a assault rifle and he's shooting tons of people at one moment and then he puts that assault rifle down and puts his hands up, I can't just go and execute him because that situation now I had to reassess and he's no longer an imminent threat. And so when we watch this video, what threat was the guy posing? And then to make matters worse is that when you see the body go limp, when his head goes limp and you still don't even look down and another 3 minutes elapses and you don't even check to see if this guy is still breathing, that's what makes it hard for me. And that's what I'm like, okay, that's showing a person, that's showing the officer's intent. And you're absolutely right when I made the statement earlier as far as, maybe this guy shouldn't have been a cop. You know what? Yeah, maybe at one point in time he was a good cop. Maybe, he did phenomenal work. Maybe he was still a good cop prior to today. Maybe he was having a bad day. I don't know. And so I do, retract my statement as maybe he shouldn't have been a cop. But I can tell you on this day he shouldn't have been a cop without a doubt. You know what I mean? And so we have to do better as officers. One of the things, I'm like a supervisor in my capacity right now. And so one of the things I tell my team is like, look, not only do we have accountability towards the public and we got to make sure that we hold the public accountable for their actions, but we have an obligation to hold each other accountable. And what that means is if you see me, even though I may be your supervisor, if you see me having a bad day, losing my mind, you have every reason to pull me away and get me away from that scene, not only just for the sake of the person I'm dealing with, but for me and my family. Because we are human, because we are going to have bad days, because we are going to lash out when we shouldn't lash out, you need to pull me back, even if I am your supervisor, and say, no, stop doing this. I'm helping you. And that's what we have to do as officers. We have to be better at that. And it's hard. It's hard because we've been in those situations. It's like, oh, shoot, like, you know what I mean? Should I? But that's the only way we're going to be able to move the pendulum back, swinging in the right direction, is we have to reassess our own situation now as officers and say, okay, how are we going to do things better moving on?
Yeah, for sure. It's I couldn't agree more. And I know people have been wanting some type of like official statement from me, and that's about as close as I can come, is to say I think it's disgusting what I saw, right? Like I can't stand by it. I can't, as far as I can see, I can't justify anything that I saw. My heart truly breaks for Mr. Floyd's family
100%.
and people who cared about him. And I know a lot of people try to kind of like, they'll take situations like this and they'll look back into a guy's past and say, well, this is kind of how he, you know, this is how he's been, you know, he's been, have you seen his rap sheet before or whatever? And I don't even know about what his past is, good, bad, or indifferent, but that doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter at all. And what's funny is I did see a video with him, and he was actually calling out the youth, saying the youth need to, we need to stop, these youth need to stop shooting each other. We need to hold our youth accountable. And you can tell he's definitely from the inner city, but his mindset, and I'm not saying this is how his whole life was. I don't know. Like you said, I don't know. But that video resonated with me because I do a lot of stuff with kids. And so the mere fact that he's trying to hold kids accountable for shooting each other and all the other stuff, I was like, man, like, this guy had a right perspective of it. And so that's what made it the situation even more terrible. Again, I don't know. He could have it, but again, even if he did have a rap sheet, like you just said, it does not matter. Like, you know, people come from different places, and I can't be judge and jury off of somebody's actions. Even the most heinous crimes, and you've been on them before. I've been on them. And it's hard. I don't have to like you, and I definitely won't treat you like not going to be kicking it with you and acting like you're my big homie or nothing like that. But if you've committed a heinous crime, I can't judge you, because when I leave this earth, somebody else is going to judge me. And if I judge you, then now anybody else can judge me based off of whatever I want to do. And it's not right. And that's why, like I say, we let the system do what the system does. Hopefully this officer is punished, rightfully so. Hopefully he's criminally charged, because that is a loss of life. And like I said in my video yesterday, watch that video from the perspective of George Floyd being one of your family members. And if that doesn't make you uncomfortable, then you might need to reassess your own situation, your own moral, your more ethical standing, because nobody can bear to watch that if you have the perspective of that being your own family member.
Yeah. And I think like the definitive statement from me, as far as like, I can take this situation and I can condemn it, you know, in its entirety, to say that. Now, I don't know what the mind of the officer is or whatever else. I mean, I get the internal cry for justice. I don't think that the answer for people is to say, I hope that officer now dies, or I hope this happens. Like, because that ends up, I think that ends up only, you know,
it makes matters worse, because
the whole eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, sort of a thing, right? So like, it's not helping. Certainly, like, and we'll get into the response in a second, but certainly some of the responses aren't super helpful. But where I'm taking the heat is that I can't say that officer killed that guy, in terms of like, he decided, I'm killing this guy right here, right now. I'm going to kill him. That's where I have to draw the line and say, I think, and people need to dial back like their expectations, because we've seen this time and time again, where there's an expectation for what a charge is going to be and what the public demands, without a real understanding of how, what charges can exist or be gone through to the end beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Like, so we want to see justice. And so I hope that he's not somehow like overcharged.
Yeah.
And there's no, then he's let off. And we've seen that before, where like the charge is wrong. So he's not convicted on that, even though there may be guilt in another area, culpability there, because certainly with the actions that we can condemn, there's zero doubt in my mind that he is negligent and complicit in that death.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if it's excited delirium and he's claustrophobic and they would have put him in the back of the car and his body heated up and he freaked out and he was going to die anyway, it would still look bad. But I think you'd be able to say, well, what, you know, they didn't. They tried to do what they could. That'd be different. In this case, they didn't try what they could. You know, they stood by while they could have done something else. And that's why I think what we should see, what we can say is that, yeah, this is terrible. And he appears to be complicit in the death of this man. And what I don't know Minnesota law or what exact charge that would end up being. But
And that's the other part.
I think it's going to be hard to prove. I think it's going to be hard to go down the road of, I mean, maybe second degree.
And that's what other people don't understand too, is like, and I didn't understand it. Actually, the Geiger case actually shed some light for me. Was when Geiger was charged with murder, and my mind was with Geiger, I was like, her intent wasn't to go in there and kill the dude.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, but if you read Texas law categorizes murder. It has one blanket, charge of murder, and there's all these subcategories under murder. So technically, in Texas, the charge was murder. And so there's a lot of technicalities that are going to go into this. The officer deserves the same due process as anybody else. And some people don't want to hear that, but it's reality. Like, you can't, on one end, you can't have your cake and you want to eat it too. Like, it's one of those, like, if you're the person that screwed up, if you're the criminal, you want due process, right? You wouldn't want the courts to not give you a fair due process. So in this situation, the officer, he's going to be charged as a criminal. He deserves the fair due process as anybody else. He deserves to be heard out. Now, again, setting expectations and setting the bar high. We have to be careful when we do that. And the reason we have to be careful is because if somebody says, hey, look, he didn't get 100 years that, I think he should have gotten. Well, did he get punished for it? Did he get something out of it? Like, we can't set this bar so high that you're not pleased. And the only way that anybody is going to find pleasure in this, and I hate to use the word pleasure because it's not necessarily the right word, but is by finding forgiveness. And like I said, because that's what helps me understand anything. If I can forgive a person, and if I can be confident in knowing that one day, whether it's on this earth or not, they will find the rightful judgment. Those are the two things that help me with anything, whether it's, and as a police officer, there's times where I'll work some heinous crimes and a dude got out like the next week or never was even charged. I just heard a case the other day, a guy has gotten away with 2 murders that we know of, and he's gotten away with it. And so a lot of times people and officers will take that stuff personal. I don't take it personal because I always fall back on is like, well, one day he's going to have to answer to that. And so whether it's in this life,
I think that's super, super valuable, man, because sort of like the next phase of this conversation, I think, is about how people are responding to this. And I definitely have noticed a trend in certain types of responses. And one of those things, you just brought it up, which is like, they basically say, if this would have been a different situation, then like, if this video was of another man on top of this guy, he would already be in jail. This cop is already no, we're talking about 2 different circumstances here. There is a huge difference between 2 dudes that might end up having a disagreement and one decides to assault the other as the starting point of this versus one man committed a crime and the police were dispatched to that crime. And here's the facts of the situation, and like you just said, I mean, I've arrested a guy before. I remember I got called to this thing. I don't want to derail with a cop story, but long story short, I drag a female out from a situation as she's the guy's trying to stab her, right? So like I'm there in the middle of this situation. And that guy, he's out, and
doesn't surprise me.
And he had committed crimes before of the same nature.
Yeah.
So the idea, cops just get away with stuff. Like, man, if you only knew what people, quote, get away with, right? Like, and if anything, and people have a hard time believing me when I say this, I'm like, if anything, cops are under so much more scrutiny of these circumstances. There's so much more pressure right now on the DA and on the police unions and on the department and on the city, with the whole country with this microscope just staring at them.
So on my recent podcast, I don't know if it wasn't the last one, it might have been the one before that. I told somebody, I said, being a police officer is dangerous, without a doubt. My buddy, like I said, just got shot 2 days ago. So we know that it comes with inherent dangers that, when we go and get in our patrol car, it comes with inherent dangers. But if you ask any police officer, most police officers, where your number one stress comes from, they're going to tell you it comes internally, like inside the police walls. It's not going to be from the streets. And that's because of that scrutiny. That's because of, if I don't do this right, I'm going to get hit up about it. If I don't do this right, I'm going to get fired about it. If I don't do this right, I'm going to get charged. Like, so the stresses we deal with are more internal than they are external. I personally, man, like, don't get me wrong. Like, when I go out there on the street, like, I'm making sure, like, hey, look, like, I got to be on my P's and Q's because somebody could try to cause some harm to me. But that's not my stress. My stress comes from internally. Like, and so the sad thing is going back to the media, is that the media, when an officer is charged, unless it's a high profile case, you're not going to hear about it. You're going to hear about the initial response. You're going to hear about the initial outcry. But these things take long times to happen. These decisions take a long time to happen. So by the time you actually come up with a verdict or rendering or whatever it is, that officer could have gotten jail time, but you would probably not even hear about it unless it's in a local newspaper, because everything has already died down. There's officers that I know right now that are in jail for rape, for doing things on duty that they shouldn't have been doing, all types of stuff. But nobody knows about it because it's the weight is already
Yes.
over. So
yeah,
we are.
I mean, this video, this conversation, or like yesterday when I went live on Instagram yesterday, just briefly, normally like I'll go on and any time of day I can expect, like 100 people on a live stream. Within 30 seconds, I had like 300. Why? Because everybody's like clamoring to talk about this right now, right? Like, but I put up a video before, like on my YouTube channel, like my experience with bad cops. Not that many views. People don't want to hear that because it's like, that's a little bit of a dose of reality where it's like, and it goes back to something I said early on, which is like, we have to resist the temptation to live our life as though just because I saw it on video, that's what happens everywhere all the time. And just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it isn't happening, because I know a cop that is in jail for theft. I know a cop that was in jail for a sexual issue on duty. I know cops that have been suspended. I have seen and been present for cops getting arrested for a variety of offenses, assaults, or drunk driving or whatever. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. It doesn't make the news. So then but it happens. And so like people like, if you were really a good cop, you'd call this out. But like, man, you don't even know how many cops in real life I've done. It's just, that's that illusion of social media where that's what makes me tired, man. It's kind of like, you got to go back again into the fray and try to communicate this and hope that some people hear it,
People have the hardest time. What's funny is I always find the middle ground is probably one of the most easiest places to be, but yet people act like you can't have a middle ground. Like I just told somebody at my department the other day, I was like, what sucks is that I have people that I work with that will crucify some of the things I say because they didn't agree with it, or they don't think I should speak out on certain things, not even realizing that the things I'm doing is really to help us out as officers. You know what I mean? So it makes our job easier in the community, but they'll crucify me for it. But then I also have the people on the opposite side, friends, family, that will crucify me because, oh, you're just going to stand with your brothers in blue and this and that, and you're not going to call what it is. And it's like, I'm actually in the middle. If you don't know anything about me, I'm going to take an unbiased approach, or I'm going to try to take an unbiased approach, and I'm going to be in the middle. But what we've created in society is this left and right platform. You can't be in the middle platform. You better pick a side, and if you don't pick a side, then shame on you. And that's the sad thing. And I'm telling people
that's why I was so slow to want to get into this conversation. And people can paint however they want. Like, oh, you're slow because now you have to admit that there's a problem. Like, what, dude? I'm like, I always tell people, like, I've been putting out content for 6 years on the internet, man. Go back. I've been crucified by cops and non-cops alike for saying something that people disagree with. Like, I've called out bad cops time and time again. And it's like, pay attention, man. But it's something that is a societal issue, is that people have to recognize that two things can be true at once.
I agree.
We can hate evil and injustice and carelessness and negligence and dehumanization of people. We can hold that in one hand, and we can also hold in the hand that But what is really also true is that with 900,000 cops, you're in a busy area. I've worked for a decade in Metro Detroit. I mean, it would be nothing for me to handle 20 to 30 calls in just our car in a shift, let alone the other cars at this, like all of which, every arrest, every fight, every whatever. I've never been in a shooting. I've come close, but I've never been in a shooting. I've been like, how many lives have been saved? What's going on? Like in that time, not a single thing on the news, like,
Exactly.
and it's like, okay, that is also true. And you multiply my experience by 900,000. I know some places are rural areas and they see like a call a week or something like that or whatever. But either way, I mean, the percentage would hold true is like almost all of them are unremarkable. And
it's crazy.
Job well done. Almost in everything. And we fixate on these things. And what I don't like is the polarization, man. Like it's like everybody it's a cognitive dissonance. You have your tribe and you process everything through that. And like I said, it goes into the social media canon and you fire it out and everybody feels like, and I see it on both sides, like the response. And let's talk about that for a little bit before we wrap it up. And the response is really bothering me because I have family members and friends, and I'll just come right out and say it, man. I think race is a huge aspect of the response. And I see a lot of people like white knighting this thing, man. They want to make a hashtag on the internet. They want to change their profile picture to "I can't breathe," and they want to feel like, "Look at me, I'm helping. I've helped injustice." And I'm just like, it's not that simple, man. It's just it's not that one dimensional, especially no. You said like you can't call this guy a racist. I messaged a friend of mine because he had posted a picture, and you probably seen it. It's got a white dude with a "Make Whites Great Again" hat.
I saw that. And
they make it, the guy looks like the cop. It's not him, but it looks like him. And I said, man, that's a fake picture. You're perpetuating. You can't combat something that is wrong with something that is wrong. Like that, it doesn't help. And he's like, his response like shocked me. I reached out to him like, do you really think, you know me, you really think that I support racism in any way, shape, or form? Like, no, but we've seen too many videos. That's like,
but see,
gosh, I'm like,
here's the frustrating thing for me is like, a situation like this happens. Okay. It happened 2 days ago. Internet just lights on fire. Like the internet's blowing up, hashtags coming out, this and that. 2 weeks are going to go by. And now people are going to be on the latest COVID-19. They're going to be on the latest freaking, NFL is coming back, or NFL is not coming back. So George Floyd is going to be forgotten by most of these people in 2 weeks. The sad thing is that, everybody wants something to be done, but nobody wants to go out and do the work to do it. Yeah. Now, I'm not trying to say, oh, pat me on the back, but I can stand here confidently and tell people, like, I take these matters so serious that today's my first day off. And the first thing I did when I woke up, back hurting it all, came in here, and I'm having this conversation with you. I have a podcast. I speak across the country to schools, to police officers. I have after school programs. I have online, like so many different things to stand by. What I say is bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community. And so the reason that's important is because everybody wants to say, oh, the justice needs to be done. This needs to be done. Well, what are you doing to make the situation better, not worse? Because making it worse is, like you said, posting a picture that's not accurate. All you're doing is fueling an already burning fire. What are you doing to put the fire out? How can we combat it? We can combat it with love. We can combat it with forgiveness. We can combat it with grace. We can combat it with knowledge. We can combat it with wisdom. Those are how we progress. Everything that I stand for, every school I talk at, is knowledge I'm giving the kids. It's wisdom I'm giving the kids. It's experiences I'm giving to the kids. It's love I'm showing to some of these kids that come from homes that don't have parents. It's, grace that I'm extending to somebody that on the street when I serve as an officer that is screwed up. But I say, instead of doing this, I'm going to do that because you treated me with respect. That's how we move forward. But we don't have enough of those people that want to go out there and do that work. Because why? Because it requires work. You know what I mean? And the internet, what the internet has done, what social media has done, is allowed everybody to have a voice. But what is the sad part is also hindering people from actually doing work. You know what I mean? So I'm going to end on this. There is I saw this a while ago, so these numbers may have changed, but it says that there's 29,000 arrests made per day. 10 million, 0.5, whatever the number is after that, arrests made per year. 40,000 contacts made per day in law enforcement. That means law enforcement easily, if not more.
That's lowballing.
That's lowballing.
That's probably dispatched contacts,
Yeah,
not even like self-initiated.
Exactly, just dispatch. Exactly. So that equates to about 14.6 million contacts per year, and that's just assuming dispatch maybe calls, not assuming personal, like you said, self-initiated. So my point in bringing up those numbers is if we look at the actual uses of force that officers have, the actual deaths of people to law enforcement officers, I think it's like 1,000 a year, maybe. Crazy small, like super low. We look at any other industry, doctors, lawyers, and all this other stuff, malpractice, the percentages are way higher. I'm not saying those numbers to justify what happened to George Floyd. I don't want you to take that as it, because like I've already said, the death of George Floyd was wrong. I won't stand by it. You guys know I won't stand by it. We need to get better as officers. We can get better as officers, and we need to hold each other accountable. But like you said earlier, Mike, we also have to look at the other end of that as well. And we can't just go out there and say, every single officer out there is bad. This is a corrupted system. People need law enforcement. If an emergency happens today and you don't know what to do, the first thing you're going to do is call 911, and you're going to expect us to be at your door 5 to 7 minutes later. And if not, you're going to be like, what the heck is going on? People need us. So if people need law enforcement, instead of crucifying us, let's figure out ways that we can work better together, so that way we can avoid situations that happen that, with George Floyd and other officers and other people that have lost their lives unjustly.
Yeah, I want people to understand that there is a choice, because this is good business. George Floyd's death, as terrible as this is to say, George Floyd's death is sadly good business for people who would love to capitalize on keeping people divided and fueling the fire and generating the ad revenue and keeping things divided. There is a benefit to certain aspects of the media and politics to keep people divided. And that's not to minimize the real differences of opinion and the reasoning that goes into those things and the experiences that go into those things. That's not to minimize that. But that's what's sad about this, is that you're right. In 2 weeks, it will be mostly forgotten. It goes on. What happened to Darren Wilson? His life was destroyed over a lie. And now who knows, what's going on with his life? Nobody knows, And what's going to be tough about this one for us is that in the case of Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, there was a lie that was perpetuated and the officer was shown to be in the right. We're not going to find that here. The officer is definitely going to be shown on some level. And that's where, I'm not ready to say definitively what his ultimate role was in the actual death.
We can't.
I hope and pray that wherever the responsibilities lie, they're identified, and the appropriate response of setting things as right as they can be in a broken, flawed system and world, that they're set as right as possible.
One thing, lastly, I'm gonna say is I'm gonna clarify. So a couple of days ago, when I made my initial post, I said that he was murdered and executed, and this is my personal opinion. Again, this is separate from what is gonna come out later in the judgment. This is Ryan Tillman's. I rarely give my personal opinion about it. That's not based on fact. This is my personal emotional opinion about it. The reason I said that, because I almost was tempted to change it, but then I was like, no, I'm not. The reason I said that personally as my personal emotional opinion was this. when the officer is on George Floyd's neck and he stays there and he does not move, he does not check on him, he does not check pulse, he does not move him to his side, he does not, call or look and say, hey, can somebody help me, give me some assistance? To me, in my mind, as that continually to progress over the 7 minutes and 53 seconds, that starts showing me the intent of a person to cause harm to another person. Now, causing harm to another person is different from trying to kill another person. Let me clarify that. It's different. But for me, slowly over time, his intent starts showing to me that he wanted to cause serious harm based on his inaction. Now, like I said, this is my emotional and personal opinion. If it comes out later that there's facts that we don't know about, that could change. It's not going to change the fact that he wasn't wrong, not at all. But it could change the fact of, what they actually charge him with. But again, that goes back to my point earlier, is that don't get caught up if he gets 25 years, if he gets 100 years, if he gets a death sentence. Don't set your expectations of he needs this. As human beings, we really shouldn't even be doing that in the first place. We have it because it has a place in our system. But at the end of the day, like I said, allow this to give you the peace. Find forgiveness in your heart. And then once you find the forgiveness in your heart, just know that every single one of us is going to meet a maker one day. I don't know what maker you believe in, but I believe in a maker. And one day we're going to be judged. And one of the most powerful pieces that I ever saw in my life was when I saw in the Amber Geiger case, victim
in the court
brother come out and offer a public apology to her. That was one of the most powerful statements in my life. And the thing that made me so mad and angry was you had people saying he shouldn't be forgiving her. Who are you to tell another person that they shouldn't be forgiving that person? You know why he forgave her? Is because that's how he found closure in his heart. That's how he's going to move on and be able to live the rest of his life. That's why he forgave her. So you are no person to say that you shouldn't be forgiving this person or not. You know what I mean? And so if we can find, there's power in forgiveness. There really is. And so that's what helps me cope with anything. If a child molester gets out, whatever it is, that's what helps me, because I know I can find forgiveness in my heart, but I also know that we'll meet our maker one day.
I agree with you too. For us, like, I think as people who would claim to follow Jesus, I think for us, that's the only way I can make sense of the world.
Only way.
For me, and people can mock that or think I'm an idiot for it or whatever else. But it is what it is. And I think part of this other response too, you mentioned earlier that imagine if Floyd was your relative, right? Your loved one. And another thing that has made me slow in this, in talking about this or dealing with this and making me tired, weighing me down too, is because I can do just that. I don't talk a lot about this in my content because I've always tried to be really, really careful about never, ever capitalizing on tragedy. And that we're in a hard spot, right? Because we're cops and these things are tragic, and we put ourselves in this position where people are looking to us for commentary, whether we want to or not. And I don't want to come off like I'm trying to capitalize on that or capitalize on this. But my brother, a cop, was killed by a black human being, or I should say a human being that happened to be black. And so when I get inundated with these emails like this and DMs like this saying that I support racism or that whatever else, man, it can wear me down, because I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, do you see me saying that because I had that experience? What would it be like if I told my kids, guys, be careful of the black people because they killed your uncle?
Man, that's powerful.
Like, I don't do that. I don't think that, or if we teased out
having a conversation with another black guy.
Like, what are you talking about? That's why I appreciated what you said. Like, this is about a human being. Like, I don't know that cop's racist. I can't say that. And it bothers me when people just because cop is white, this guy's black, racist. Like, man, that is so oversimplified. And that to me is racist. Like, you're judging a situation based on skin color. Now, where racism exists, man, it's got to be rooted out. It's got to be destroyed. I get that. But we can't just jump to those tribes and automatically say that. And it's always funny to me when people say, what if it were somebody you cared about? I'm like, yeah, I can tell you, I know what it's like. And I told you this, AJ's got 2 cops in his department that were shot this week, and I don't know if that's allowed to be said, like we didn't identify who that is, whatever. Hopefully that's not an issue, but that happened. Some of those shot this week. I know a cop personally that was shot this week. So like, am I going to take that this week? Am I going to go dig up body cam footage and be like, you see that? This black carjacker shot my white cop girlfriend, girlfriend sounds terrible. Like I'm married, but I was like, she's a friend, say like she got shot by a black carjacker. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take to the internet and say like, man, this is crazy.
It can go. I have a family member that was killed by another black guy. And so my point in saying that is like, should I now not like black people because he was killed by another black? Like, this is a human nature. Now, again, don't get me wrong. There is definitely racism that still exists in the country, without a doubt. When you got guys that are wearing hats that, like, whatever the hat, what he had on or whatever.
Make whites great again.
Yeah, clear, easy. I can say that. It's racist all day. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even going to get into politics. But anyways, the fact of the matter is that we have a human nature problem. Again, going back, I keep going back because this is how I think, but, spiritually, like, we have a human nature problem. Like, human nature, by nature, we are sinful people. By nature, we have a sinful nature. That's what it means. We have a sinful nature. So we have a human being problem. And racism is part of that sinful nature. Yeah, racism started from that sinful nature. And so my point is that we can't always chalk up everything to race. Race definitely plays a part in some situations in life, and it plays a part in some situations in law enforcement, without a doubt. But we can't classify this one as
played a role in this.
It could have. It very well could have. We find out this guy has been pulling over more minorities, has more uses of force with minorities, and he said amazing racial comments and stuff, without a doubt. But
I've been and I think why I've been so careful with this situation too, before like wanting to speak on it, is because I've seen too many cops railroaded for certain things that ultimately proved to be not exactly true, or like the situation you said, like, oh, you're on video, it looks bad. I had a situation years ago on 8 Mile, like home at Eminem, and it would look bad. If you saw just a clip of this video with me fighting with this dude in the middle of the road, it would look terrible. But in the end, the court system, they ran all sorts of things. In my community where I was policing, it was like we had 70% African American, and then whatever the rest is left over, like a mix, and they found out that 80% of our taser use was on African Americans, and I'm like,
well, the population is majority.
Okay, like and that can be interpreted in so many different ways. Be like, well, what are you trying to say that?
That's a topic for it. That's a topic for a whole other
yeah,
day.
I'm like, it's like, oh my gosh. And that's one of the reasons I was so slow on this. Cause I'm like, is this racist? Is it? Yeah. Let's look, let's wait. Let me think on this. And people just don't have the patience. Everybody wants me to make a video like,
that's what the internet's done. The internet's done to us, man. Everyone's that microwave, like, hey man, put it in the microwave. I got it now. So
yeah. So
this was a pleasure, man. I love this.
Let's end it with what is your message to cops and what is your message to non-cops?
All right, cool. So this is easy. For cops, we have to be able to swallow the pill and say that we have to hold each other accountable. It just comes down to that. Like, I know it's hard. I know it's not easy. And even if you don't want to be the one that's vocally doing it, at least support others that are. You don't have to be the one that makes videos. You don't have to be the one that comes out, but support the ones that are. You know what I mean? Because we need you. Me and Mike need you, because it does become cumbersome. It becomes tiresome. You know what I mean? Because you're getting inundated. So at least support the ones you are. We got to be able to take a stand. We all know that in our hearts, if you signed up to do this job as a law enforcement officer, you took that oath like I did, we all know why we did it. And we always have to be striving constantly to maintain that in our heart of I stood up to do what's right, morally, ethically, and always safely. So we know that. Always strive to continue to do better with that. But if we want to genuinely improve our relationship with the community, we have to take a stand and hold each other accountable, which we are doing, but we can do better. To the community, I feel with you right now. I mourn with you. This is a black eye to our profession. This should have never happened. I understand that, but I plead with you, don't react based off of emotion, react based off of fact. It is very hard. The two are very, very different. When you react from an emotional standpoint, you may say things that you would have never said if you did it from a factual standpoint. You may have done a nonverbal gesture that you should have never done if you would have done it from a factual standpoint. So try to make a calculated, or I don't want to say calculated, take a step back, soak in the emotions. It's okay to have emotions, but also, go out there, get more information, get more research. And I'm not talking about the George Floyd situation. I'm talking about law enforcement in general. Go to your local department, find out what law enforcement is about. Go to the community outreach events. Go to the citizens academies. Go on a ride along. Get in tune. Find out what law enforcement is all about. That's what changed for me. At the beginning of this conversation, I told you guys why I didn't like police officers and then why I started BBU. What changed for me is I found out what law enforcement was really about. I found out the need for it. So until you know what the actual need of law enforcement is about, you will continue to react based off of your emotional appeal when you see these videos because you don't know what we're about. And so that's what I mean. Like I said, it has nothing to do with the George Floyd situation. When I talk about gathering information and gathering knowledge, it's about the profession in and of itself. We need to do better. We can do better, and we will do better. But we need you to at least accept the fact that law enforcement's not going nowhere, and the only way things are going to get better is by working in a team capacity. I love you guys. If you need anything, reach out to me on my account, Breaking Bears United, whatever it is, or through my friend Mike. But I'm here to help you guys.
It's awesome. I think I would tell cops, like sometimes kids don't like to be disciplined, even though it's for their own good. And I would say, like, listen, no matter what you perceive this conversation to be, or you perceive the position of being critical of how this was handled, and the responsibility of where it's going to end up lying in part or whole on the part of these officers, that we're trying to do it for your good, whether you see that or not. We're trying to keep fighting the battle for perception. We understand perception is not reality.
No,
but perception is powerful nonetheless, and it is the reality for some people. They live with the reality of their perceptions and not on objective information or facts or experience. So we're trying to do something that in the long term we hope benefits you and protects you and keeps a better perception, a more accurate perception of the profession in mind, keeps you safer in the process. And then to those that are non-cops, I can't say it better than you did, man. Like, you got to step away from the emotions long enough. You can't ignore what you really feel about injustice as a whole, or for Mr. Floyd, but you have to be able to somehow step back and think, okay, what can I actually do? Looting, rioting, more violence, those aren't appropriate responses to injustice. And yeah, violence begetting violence isn't helpful for anybody. And so ask yourself the same question I think Ryan's asking, I'm asking, what's our next step to humanize the badge? What's our next step to bridge this gap, this divide, real or perceived? What's our next thing? I think you need to ask yourself that as a person. What's my next thing that I can do? Not that I can hashtag, not that I can say, not that I can complain about, not that I can feel justified on social media about. What next step in your real life, with your hands, with your mouth and mind in real life, are you going to do to make a difference in what you see? So hopefully both sides see that. And I mean, I feel so much better just having a conversation. And like I said, I so appreciated the fact that you were able to put together a 10-minute video. I saw Donut shared it. You had it. I watched it. My family's sharing it. You've had a huge impact on how my family's walked through this. And so thank you for your work.
You know, what's funny is as we're talking, I just saw my chief just shared it, which was cool to me. That
Yeah,
was cool to me.
I dig it. I thought you brought it back with that law enforcement code of ethics. It was like, yeah, man, that really resonates. And I think like a lot of people don't know that there's a code of ethics that most of us
Yeah.
recite and memorize and embed in ourselves. And maybe we would get some words wrong if we tried it, like me 11 years later to recite it. But as you read it, I can like mouth, it's in there, it's like, it's there. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's what this is about. And you were able to do what I was incapable of doing, which was take that and put it into something that, man. So kudos to you,
That was
because
all
you,
Christ.
like I said, man, you
That's
did what
Christ.
I was struggling to do, and I wanted to do it. I just couldn't do it. Something wasn't. The cylinders weren't all firing for me. So you stepped in and handled it. So thank you.
It was Christ through me. That's it, man. And Mike, I appreciate the work you're doing. And I give you guys, whoever's watching this video, I give you guys my promise that me, Mike, AJ, all of us, we're going to continue to get better, do what we do. So that way, again, my son wants to become a police officer. I said this yesterday on the other show.
I tell my kids they're crazy. Don't do it.
I know, right? And if this is what he wants to do, then at the very least, what I can do is make this job the best it can be and the safest it can be. So when he does take that badge and that oath, that I feel comfortable knowing that he's going into a better situation than I walked into.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we probably went over an hour, so this might not fit on IGTV. I think it's a 60. Is that a 60-minute time limit?
I don't know. It might be. You might have to cut it up though, or
I
just
don't know.
put it on YouTube.
Whatever. I'll put it on. I'm going to put it on YouTube, Facebook, IGTV, whatever. Well, I'll put it everywhere.
Appreciate it, guys. Hey, if you guys aren't listening, listen to the It's Needed podcast. Mike, we got to have you on the podcast, man. Just let me know when you're ready and let's do it. And
I'm down whenever, man. It'd be an honor.
Yeah, it'd be good too. It'd be good too because AJ's on there too. So It's Needed podcast and Breaking Bears United. If you guys need anything, reach out.
Love it.
Take care.